Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a wildly entertaining mathematical thought experiment from personal finance blogger Gerry. Through his platform, The Millionaire Educator, Gerry decided to chart the absolute extreme limits of wealth accumulation. We're going to break down his piece titled My Trillionaire Plan Revisited, tracing a path from astronomical mega success all the way down to what he laughingly calls absolute failure. So it all started back in 2015, when Gerry asked himself a wonderfully crazy question. Would it be possible for me to become a trillionaire? I mean, he was looking around at the giants of the modern financial world, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Warren Buffett, and he just wondered, could a regular guy, currently 62 years old, actually give them a run for their money using nothing but the sheer math of compounding interest? Now, before we even touch the numbers, I just have to highlight this fantastic quote from the author himself. He says, "Wow, if this is financial failure, keep it coming." This perfectly sets the playful, mind-bending tone for our explainer today. We're basically going to be doing a reality check countdown, starting way up in the clouds and then landing squarely on the ground. But as you'll see, even when the math, quote-unquote, fails to create a trillionaire, the results are just absolutely incredible. Okay, let's dive into this. Any good financial experiment needs strict baseline rules, so here are the assumptions driving the math. First, our subject is currently 62 years old. His starting principal, the present value, is exactly $2.5 million. And here is the absolutely crucial rule of this entire experiment. Additional payments are zero. He's not adding a single penny to this portfolio, and he's not withdrawing from it either. He's relying entirely on his pensions and Social Security to live, leaving this nest egg completely alone. Finally, 99% of this money is just parked in a basic Vanguard total stock market ETF. That's it. Those are the rules. The money just sits and grows. The stratosphere scenario I. All right, this is the absolute best-case blue sky projection. Gerry assumes that thanks to his rigorous diet and exercise regime, he's going to live to the ripe old age of 140. That's another 78 years of life. As he jokingly warns the ladies in his article, he'll be ancient, handsome, and loaded. Keep your hands to yourselves. But beyond his extreme longevity, this scenario also assumes the market goes on this epic AI-driven bull run, delivering an astounding 18% annual return for those entire 78 years. So if you leave $2.5 million completely untouched for 78 years at an 18% return, boom, you get this massive 13-digit number, over $1 trillion. He actually hits the goal. Now, Gerry fully admits he can already hear the doom patrol in the back of the room yelling that these assumptions are wildly optimistic. And yeah, living to 140 and securing nearly a century of 18% returns is, let's be real, a total fantasy. But that's the beauty of this experiment. Now that we've hit the ceiling, we can start systematically working our way down. The descent to reality. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how fast the wealth cascades downward. To find reality, Gerry knocks exactly 10 years off his life expectancy and 2% off the returns for each subsequent scenario. Just look at how punishing the math is. In scenario 1, he lives to 130 with a 16% return. Suddenly, he's down to $60.4 billion. Dropping just 10 years and 2% wiped out 94% of his trillion-dollar fortune. By scenario 3, living to 120 at 14%, he's at $4.9 billion. Still a multi-billionaire, sure, but dropping fast. Scenario 4 takes us to age 110 at 12%, leaving roughly $575 million. And then we hit scenario 5. Let's just pause on scenario V for a sec. Age 100 with a 10% expected return. Honestly, earning 10% historically in the stock market isn't a crazy expectation at all. And living to 100? With modern medicine, it's increasingly common. Gerry actually jokes about this, pointing out that hitting a century is pretty good considering he's an unvaxxed non-vegan. But look at that yield, $93.5 million. He didn't lift a finger. He didn't add a dime. If $93 million is what failure looks like compared to his trillion-dollar dream, yeah, I think we'd all gladly accept that failure. The ground floor, scenarios VII and VIIC. Let's bring this completely down to earth. Scenario V assumes an age of 90, which people reach all the time, and an 8% return, which is actually kind of unspectacular for the stock market. The result? $21.5 million. Finally, we reach scenario 7. This is what Gerry calls his absolute worst-case, hyper-crappy scenario. He only lives to 80, and the market delivers a deeply disappointing 6% return. The final value? $7.1 million. Now, 6% might be a total bummer, but it still leaves massive, life-changing generational wealth for his heirs.
all without adding a single new penny to that original principal. And this brilliantly illustrates the vast, almost incomprehensible gap between the extreme mathematical dream and grounded reality. On one side, 78 years of compounding at 18% creates a literal trillion-dollar empire. On the other side, a relatively brief 18 years of compounding at a sluggish 6% results in $7.1 million. They are literally many time zones away from each other. The core lesson. So what does this all mean? Why do all this extreme math in the first place? Well, pulling back the curtain, this exercise was never actually about becoming a trillionaire. It's a vivid stress test of compounding growth. You probably already know that time in the market and rate of return are the two main levers of wealth. But by pushing those variables to their absolute mathematical limits and then walking them back down, Gerry perfectly shows us just how violent that exponential curve becomes in those later decades. As Gerry says point blank in the piece, never underestimate the power of compounding growth over decades. The ultimate takeaway here is honestly incredibly comforting. Even if you completely fail to reach the stratosphere, even if your market returns are a bummer and you don't live to see your 100th birthday, just leaving your money alone to compound over time creates an incredibly secure financial position. You really don't need $1 trillion to win the game. So I want to end with the exact same provocative question Gerry poses to his readers. Which scenario is most likely for you? When you look at your own savings, your own age, and the decade stretching out ahead of you, what are your possibilities? It is absolutely a question worth calculating. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this inspired you to think about the undeniable power of time in the market.